Let's go to some fantastic analysis from Ben Thompson over at Stratechery. He's talking about the de minimis loophole, and he opens with a quote from Bloomberg. The U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs on China and other countries are rocking markets and casting a pall over Chinese firms seeking to go public. Take Shein, the fast fashion sensation. The online retailer founded in China but headquartered in Singapore is said to be working on what could be one of the biggest listings in London in years, potentially valuing the company at $61 billion as soon as this year. Trump's executive orders specify that the de minimis exemption for packages worth less than $800, a loophole used by the likes of Shein for years, will no longer apply. Though Shein has been diversifying its shipping bases ahead of Trump's trade policies, the full scope of the de minimis changes is still unclear. It's unlikely that the company would be immune to the changes. Shein didn't respond to a request for comment.
Yeah, John, can you break down for the audience? So Shein manufactures their products in China, and then instead of sending a single shipping container that would have a value far higher than $800, they send the individual packages from China direct to consumers. And that's what allows them to get around that's the loophole, right?
Yes, that is the de minimis loophole. And the reason that the de minimis loophole exists, this is not something that Shein and Temu lobbied for, and then, they got lucky and they knew that this was going to be a thing. No, the de minimis loophole makes a ton of sense, because if you're some Etsy seller and you want to send someone a $50 package, a t-shirt from Italy to America, it makes sense that having to do all the different customs and tariffs and all the different oversight on that small package is cumbersome. It actually imposes a massive cost on the government and the ports, and there's all this extra filings. And so the government kind of wisely at the time said, hey, let's just focus on the big stuff that's coming in, the massive shipments of pallets of TVs or the cars that are coming in. Let's tax those. And you know what? At the time, I'm sure they looked at it and they were like, if we draw the bar at $800, that's less than 1% of trade volume. And so sure, we'll lose if we're taxing something at 10%, we'll lose 10% of 1% of our trade, revenue. Doesn't matter. Not a big deal. But then once this loophole started to exist and became popularized, people figured out how to take advantage of it. And the answer was, let's ship directly from the factory, an individual package directly to the American consumer. It takes a long time. And so when you go on Temu, I actually went on Temu, and it is the funniest e-commerce flow you've ever seen. You go to Google Images and you search for something, you land on the Temu website, you're on mute. And you land on the Temu, web view. It really wants you to install the app, but it does one of those spinners, the spinners to be like, what's your % off? And I'm like, okay, I guess I have to click this to get to the product or whatever. And it spins, and you always win 100% off. They realized that giving someone 10% off isn't as good. So just tell them they got 100% off. And then it pops up another spinner that's like, now you're eligible for a multiplier, and it's like 2x, 3x, 6x. You always win the highest multiple. So then all of a sudden it's like, you have won $600 in free stuff, install the app. And then of course, once you go down that funnel, it's like, oh, well, you got to pay shipping and all this other stuff. And the shipping's the only thing that costs money. So, is this whole kind of scammy, ultra optimized thing. But I was just cracking up being like, oh, really, Temu? You're just going to give me all this stuff for free? It's such a scam.
Well, you remember when we launched our trailer for the podcast?
Yeah.
At the end of last year, one of the negative comments that I saw was, Tech Brothers do Temu Succession. And I was like, yes, this is Temu Succession. We filmed this video in basically 12 hours with a $2,000 budget. You nailed it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how Temu became such a exploded, and I don't know if Ben has the data here, but it did become popular, and it did make it really difficult. If you made custom T-shirts at a factory in LA, and you could go on Temu and get a shirt that's oftentimes something like a t-shirt, you're not as worried about the quality if you're just some company that plans to give them away. Say you're an ice cream shop, you'd rather pay $5 for the t-shirt than $25 locally. And so it really made it almost impossible to compete if you were a localized manufacturer.
Yeah. And it's been part of this, this value chain erosion that's happened, where it used to be, like Apple manufactures in China. They have a massive facility there, a huge partnership with Foxconn. There's Apple employees on the ground. And so it's very much like an Apple designed and made product with the help of Chinese manufacturing. Then you go to the next level, which is like, oh, an entrepreneur has an idea and they're like, I want to just sell t-shirts, and they just call a Chinese factory. They basically do everything. It's very turnkey. And then they list that on Amazon, and it's like China's providing like all the manufacturing. Then Shein and Temu kind of cut out the middleman and just went direct. And so all of a sudden it went like products come out of the Chinese factory and they go directly to the door of the American consumer.
Yeah. And to be clear, manufacturers like Apple aren't benefiting from this loophole, even if they're selling a $500 product, because Apple is sending, a shipping container with 10,000 AirPods in it.
Yep.
And so the total value, even though the individual product might be a couple $100, ends up being far beyond the sort of loophole because the loophole is based around the shipment itself.
Exactly. And so Temu is owned by PDD Holdings, a company that I'm sure we'll do a deep dive on soon. They rapidly expanded in the United States by offering steep discounts on a variety of products for people willing to wait a week or so for delivery, because it comes literally from China, from the factory. This is another Chinese-linked firm that's in the U.S.'s crosshairs. The popular marketplace, which eMarketer estimates will sell $30 billion of products to U.S. shoppers this year, became an alternative to Amazon, as well as retail chains such as Hobby Lobby, Party City, and dollar stores. Like Shein, Temu has largely anticipated Trump's decision by expanding networks in the U.S. and moving to bigger bulk orders. Temu didn't respond to requests for comment. American shoppers and companies imported about $48 billion of shipments from the world under the de minimis loophole in the first 9 months of last year, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection estimates. And so we will show...
You can think of what we're doing for technology podcasting, Temu is doing for consumer products, just flooding the market with, and the scale is honestly unbelievable. And the obvious critique of Temu and the long-term critique of China has just been, that they're manufacturing products at incredible scale, at incredible prices, and just flooding the market. And oftentimes, specifically in the case of Temu, you can, if you want to buy an air filter, you can go buy a Temu air filter. I'm sure it costs like $20.
Yep.
And the critique is that, you would have had to spend $200 to get a comparable product that was made by a more reputable firm. And the Temu product's going to just basically evaporate over time, break down, and things like that. And so a lot of these products have a pretty short, not shelf life, but just life in general, right?
Totally. And so there are two charts in here that we'll show. One is de minimis exports from China over the last 6 years, from 2018 to 2023. And the top bar there is going, or the bottom bar is going to the United States. But you can see China has ramped up these de minimis exports from about $5 billion in 2018 to $65 billion in 2023. And so this de minimis loophole was discovered and then exploited to great effect. And you've seen, this chart.
So the blue bar is the United States, but the other section and the rest of the bars there are presumably there aren't. It's maybe Malaysia, Taiwan, United Kingdom, Vietnam, et cetera, adopted similar de minimis.
Oh yeah. De minimis is a common construct because it increases efficiency of trade. And so other is probably all of Europe, Africa, LATAM, like all these different countries combined. And you can just tell that like this chart looks like a startup graph, but you don't see graphs like this in global trade. Like global trade typically grows at like 2%, 3%, 10%, not 6x or 10x over. 10x over 6 years. Like that's very, very rare. And it's all driven by just finding this loophole and then just spamming it basically. And so let's go into the Stratechery article. Ben writes, now that tariffs are front and center in the news cycle, you may see some commentary referring to the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which dramatically raised tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods in an attempt to protect U.S. industries. Is so interesting. This stuff is not new. Many commentators feel that it contributed to the Great Depression. One challenge in implementing that level of tariffs, however, was the sheer amount of manpower necessary to inspect every import and levy the appropriate fee, particularly for small items mailed to individuals. To alleviate the challenge, the act included a de minimis exception. And so this is what we were talking about. And here's a quote. That the Secretary of the Treasury be and is hereby authorized in his discretion to prescribe regulations for the administration free of duty articles not exceeding a value $1 imported by one person one day. So that $1 figure, it was originally $1 in 1930. It's been expanded. In 1962, they took it to $10. In 75, they took it to $25. In 78, there was a lot of inflation in the 70s. They took it to $50. In 1980, it was 100, 288. And then finally in 2016, it went up to 2018.
The lesson here, go back in time and buy Bitcoin in 1930. This currency debasement is concerning.
Yep. And so this has been a boon to businesses like Temu and Shein, which sell Chinese-made products to U.S. consumers and then ship them directly. So now China dominates de minimis shipments. A key part of China's global e-commerce growth has been the expansion of PRC and PRC-tied e-commerce firms into the U.S. market. The U.S. retail e-commerce market constitutes over half of all global e-commerce sales. And so imports under Section 321 of the Tariff Act of 1930. And Ben, I don't know if Jordy's not on screen, but you might just want to go to me. Section 231 allows for U.S. imports under a de minimis threshold to enter free of tariffs, fees, and taxes. In 2016, Congress raised the threshold to $800 per shipment, and that dramatically changed the landscape. And so let's go to as China is dominating. This is obviously important, particularly for U.S. e-commerce and its associated ecosystem, but this has also played a significant role in the fentanyl epidemic. Reuters has an excellent in-depth investigation of the relationship here. We will have to read that on the show soon. And so the big question is, how is this affecting Amazon and Meta? And I don't know what happened with Jordy. Let's see.
I'm still here. I think my camera battery died. So
you can probably just switch it over to the computer camera, and I think you'll be good there. And we should be able to see that. So Stratechery, however, is a tech newsletter, and the angle I am most interested in is the effect on U.S. tech companies. That list starts with Amazon, which will likely be affected by this rule. And so the information reported previously that Amazon plans to launch a section of its shopping site featuring cheap items that will ship directly to overseas consumers from warehouses in China. So this de minimis exception was such a big deal that Amazon was like, well, we have to compete. We can't just get left behind here. So we need a Temu competitor within the Amazon ecosystem. And so those orders, they're not going to be prime. They're not going to be next day. They're going to take 9 to 11 days to get to customers, but they will stem the bleeding because it's a directly competitive product with Temu. And so it's not clear if these Amazon shipments will be made using a U.S. trade provision that exempts individual packages worth less than $800 from U.S. customs duties. Shein and Temu are among sellers that use the provision, which some U.S. politicians and trade groups have criticized as a tariff loophole. So it's hard to understand the point of this new offering if it's not leveraging the de minimis loophole. Like, that's the only reason that Amazon would do this, is because they're interested in leveraging the loophole. The program did launch last fall, by the way, and it's called Amazon Haul, which I think is so funny. What a great one. Amazon said...
Well, this is, and that's probably cool. A reference to people ordering 100 items on Temu and then doing these sort of unboxing videos, these TikTok videos. I'm sure that the thing is, TikTok has been using, they do this warming feature, which we talked about on the show yesterday, where they will show your videos to more people if you talk about specific topics. So over the last week, it's been, if you talk about DeepSeek, you're going to get a lot of views. And so I'm sure they did a number of things where if you do Temu hauls, you're going to get a bunch more views. And so just blatant proof that the Chinese companies coordinate to use TikTok as a channel to influence activity in the US.
Oh yeah.
Which is, again, why is the company still operating? I don't know. I'm sure there's deals being done, behind the scenes.
That's the big reason why Ben Thompson was advocating for Amazon or Walmart to be the logical acquirer for TikTok if there was a divestiture, because that is the ultimate monetization for TikTok, more so than just running ads. And so if you sell it to Meta, it's this crazy, it is kind of like anti-competitive. They're building this crazy monopoly. Google doesn't really need it. Microsoft, it doesn't really make that much sense, but Amazon or Walmart could be perfectly positioned because TikTok Shop has been so successful.
Well, and we learned yesterday from somebody in the chat too that Walmart took a shot at social media with their WM Connect product back in the AOL days. So Walmart is no stranger to social media.
Yeah, and so Ben is throwing some shade here, putting Amazon in the truth zone. He says, I suspect when Amazon says, we also hear from customers, they mean we look nervously at Temu and Shein's rising sales numbers. Haul, interestingly enough, is only available on mobile, where Temu and Shein derive their sales. In other words, I still believe in my original thesis. Amazon would love for this loophole to be closed. A world where everyone pays the same import duties is one where Amazon's delivery network can be much more effectively brought to bear.
Yeah, and it is interesting to think about how these companies realize that even though U.S. consumers basically now demand 2-day shipping max, your conversion rate will suffer if you're not offering competitive shipping. They realize, hey, if we can get somebody 50 items for what it costs to order, 5 items on Amazon, they'll wait. They're happy to wait 7 days in exchange.
And so Temu and Shein are not responsible for all of Meta's growth. We're going over to how this affect Facebook and Instagram. But the two companies combined, it's estimated, spent just under $3 billion year to date. Meta's revenue is up around $11 billion year over year. And so the growth of Temu and Shein, certainly they're spending more, they're driving a lot of growth, but Meta's growing independently. So it's less of this existential issue. If Temu and Shein go away, it shouldn't be that much of an effect on Meta. Moreover, this spend is more palatable and potentially sustainable than TikTok's spend was. So when TikTok was spending on Meta, they were directly stealing, users. But e-commerce apps are not a strategic threat to Meta, quite the opposite, in fact, and also lack of network effects to make them self-sustaining entities like TikTok has become. So the subsidies could go away, macro events could intervene. Meta still deserves credit for figuring out ATT, but Temu and Shein do make the story a bit more complicated because while ATT was kind of throwing all this curveball towards Meta, and they were figuring out how do we get the small, mom and pop e-commerce engines going again. Well, Temu and Shein came in and were like, here's $3 billion to keep the revenues up and to the right, which is great. And so this quarter did turn out to be the peak of Temu and Shein's share of Meta advertising, around under 7% on Facebook and just under 4% on Instagram. And they're down to around 4% and 2% respectively now. Still, to the extent their businesses are impacted by these measures, and notably an important part of their hedging has been building distribution centers in Mexico, there may be some impact on Meta's ad prices. I don't think it'll be substantial, is what Ben says. And so very, very interesting, very, very interesting discussion of how the Trump tariffs and changes in regulation are affecting tech. He ends with a little bit about AI and abundance. It's worth pointing out that the de minimis exception exists for a good reason. We mentioned this. There are a lot of items that are shipped into the US every year, and it's understandably difficult to examine everything. It's also worth pointing out that any item that qualified for the de minimis exception also gets to use what is known as informal entry, which means much more limited paperwork, no needs for a custom bond. Informal entry applies to shipments worth less than $2,500. To that end, it remains to be seen just how much of a difference these tariffs make and exactly how the U.S. Customs Authority handles the onslaught of packages. So, you're doing Doge, you're trying to cut down on the amount of government employees. Well, you might have just 10x the amount of work that's going on if you're trying to investigate and tax all these packages. But he ends by saying, I would also note that this seems like a very interesting problem on which AI could be brought to bear. There's a story here about how the internet scale simply crushes a loophole created for an analog world. Perhaps there is a solution in which AI's ability to ingest and understand vast amounts of data could make sense of the chaos in a way that preserves the convenience while solving a problem of abundance. Of course, the chasm between theory and reality is a massive one, particularly in terms of government bureaucracy. But I do think that this is one of the many examples of where AI will have unexpected benefits. And so we got to get Luke Ferrator into the
what is it? Department of Homeland Security. I don't actually.
Yes, I don't know. Yeah. The at the ports, he's got to go to the port.
Yeah.
He's got to open his laptop.
Ports.
And set up some LLMs to look at every de minimis import that's coming in. I guess U.S. Customs and Border Patrol is the one. It's the Customs Department. And so let's move on to our third story of the day. A wonderful deep dive. So that last one was from Ben Thompson over at Stratechery. Highly recommend that you go subscribe. It's a fantastic newsletter in your email 3 times a week, and you also get a bunch of podcasts, a bunch of great stuff with it. So